we've heard trade experts talk about how developing countries can use e-commerce to leapfrog. A 2017 World Bank report defines this as a quick jump in economic development by harnessing technological innovation. So what are some concrete steps that you think other developing countries besides Sri Lanka can take to leapfrog using e-commerce? You've done this.
So I will say what was kind of missing when I started and still seems missing as we go on. I've identified 4 areas. I would call it the 4 pillars that the private sector and the government can come together and really thrive e-commerce in a developing country. Number 1, I would say, is make the telcos more competitive. Now, you talk about coverage, you talk about giving access. That's already there. If you take most developing countries, yes, coverage is great, it's already there. But are the telcos genuinely and honestly competitive? Probably not, because countries like Sri Lanka or Myanmar, Pakistan, etc., these countries have about 70 to 80% of a rural population who are simply using these reload cards, and they buy daily data limits and go on that. And the telcos are not very competitive in these areas, and actually customers cannot afford it. It needs to be really affordable internet, not just the internet. So the telcos needs to be really become competitive, like big number portability. So if I don't like one network, I can switch to another without changing my number. Things like that needs to come into a country. Second, I would say, is the banks of a country needs to understand e-commerce. Like today, if I go into a bank and ask for a loan to start a rice farm, they know the formula. They will look at my history and give it to me. But if I go and say I'm starting an e-commerce company, they will not understand the business. They will not be able to fund me, and I will be getting into the A+ risk category, and most likely will never get that loan because they don't understand the potential of e-commerce. We can't blame them, because from the board level of these big banks, they don't understand the e-commerce business overall. So I think banks in any country should have, just like an SME head, you should have an e-commerce head who really looks at e-commerce ventures and helps that. And the third is really the intellectual property needs to be, and the privacy of that needs to be protected. For example, again, if I'm getting 100 spam emails today, I don't have a legal way here to really block that and go after them and say, look, you have emailed me without my permission. We don't have the mechanisms to do that. There may be laws, but they are not very applicable. Just like that, what if I sell my customer database today to a different company, right? That's wrong, and there is not enough applicable laws in certain countries to come after and say, look, you shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have shared your data with a third party. So that needs to come. The last but the most important, I would say, is giving a facelift to the post office, right? These post offices are giant, very established, super powerful entities in these countries, but they need a facelift to get into e-commerce, right? If the post office in Sri Lanka was super capable of the tech integration, I wouldn't have needed grasshoppers at all. I mean, the post office is much bigger, much more powerful, has so much of more resources. It just needs a facelift. So those 3 things or 4 things: the telcos, we need the banks to understand e-commerce, we need the privacy protections, and we need the post offices to have a facelift. Those are the 4 that I really think is important.